See a little clock?
Yeah, I can.
All right. TikTok.
TikTok.
And if we don't get a chance to talk about this during your presentation, I guess I'll ask a question now because I'm interested. You've done a lot of international travel. You've done some international classes and training. Do you find anything different, any peculiarities, anything anthropologically associated with how people from other countries do bookbinding?
I have not found that. The only place I've been to was Italy to train, and the teachers there were mainly from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like I was already trained that way.
Okay.
So I don't know that. I would love to go to Ascona or there's so many places teaching bookbinding that I need to try it out because I don't know that much about international bookbinding.
Well, if you're going to go someplace to learn about bookbinding, you might as well go to a country you want to go to.
Yeah.
All right. Say hello to Gabby.
Hi, Bubba.
Hi, Gabby. All right. Now go away.
I put my dog in the house so he doesn't bark.
And a couple times a week, Tony brings me a present, of course, a mouse, a mole, a bird. What to do about it? You can't stop it. It's nature. And I'm in the city. I mean, I'm at 23rd. You know where that is. It's city. He can't wander more than a block or two, but somehow or other, he seems to acquire a small menagerie of usually live. He usually brings them home live. And it's terrible. Come in the house at 2 a.m. with a mouse, and I'm until 4 trying to catch that mouse alive, and with a kitchen towel, and I pounce upon it. It's awful. Or a bird, and the bird's flying up in the ceiling, and I can't reach it.
Yeah. We have tons of alley cats, so I think they keep the mouse population down, which is great. So many alley cats.
Do they serenade to you in late in the evening sometimes?
Sometimes, yep. And it sounds so bad. Somebody's dying.
No, I'm a good sleeper. When Tony leaves at 10, I go to bed at 10, and I don't hear from him until he wakes me up.
Yeah.
Even if he is outside prowling with the rest. Oh, there she is. Good morning,
I'm here.
Lee.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hi. I've been looking forward to this, Gabby. I looked on your website and I was blown away. My goodness.
You. Nice to meet you, Lynn. Leland.
I answered to either. I've been, when I became engaged, my boss at the time said it sounded like an Oriental exotic dancer, which couldn't have been further from the truth. But
in the first 3 weeks I was here, we have Lee Lynn and Lynn Thompson, and I was hi Lee Lynn Thompson, Lee Lynn and Lynn Thompson. I was totally to get which was which.
We just all answer to anything.
And then we have a Lowe. Then we have a Barbara Lowe. So we have a Barbara Lowe, Lee Lynn Thompson.
Well, has everybody had a busy week?
How was your book club? I saw the pictures of your newly redecorated home on Facebook. It's beautiful.
Yes, I'm through for the moment. Anyway,
you should be very proud of the interior decorating job you did.
I am, and book club was great. And I'm excited about doing this little short piece on book club every week. We have a good time. We're growing old together. Our average age is about 78, I think. And
keep going. I got to go feed Tony, otherwise he's going to bug the heck out of me. I'll be right back.
Please feed poor Tony.
Come on.
And so, so we are. But we haven't met in 15 months, and so this was a really nice get together. We had a good time. We ate, we drank, we talked about what we've read in the last year and a half, and just enjoyed being together with no masks on, and everybody had been vaccinated that was there. So it was good. It was good. You miss that kind of thing, especially when you don't work, outside the home much. And we've spent a lot of time on porches and patios the last year with 2 or 3 people, but not with a group of 9, which is what we had Sunday night.
Yeah.
That was a quick meal for poor Tony.
I
Just throw it out there.
yeah.
Gabby, you'll probably notice that some of us have cats that wander around.
Look, he scratched me.
I
He drew blood.
I have some of those too. My cat isn't content to travel in the background. She gets up on the keyboard, and I've had to stop being on Rare Book Cafe to remove the cat before.
My cats are in the house. They're not allowed in the studio.
Well, that's all one space, so I work from home.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, same here. Unfortunately, my bookstore is in my apartment, and he sheds too much. I had to get someone to come, a cleaner come once a month to help me vacuum this place.
And this is shedding time of the year as it's gotten warmer. She has long hair and she's big and there's a lot of hair. I keep a dust buster handy.
But bookstore cats are a reality. There's Instagram pages devoted to them, and everybody likes to show off their bookstore cat. A lot of people keep the cat in the store overnight to protect against vandals.
And mice.
Yeah.
And David Hess's cat always wanders through on his
Yes, I sometimes see him in the background.
Yeah. So we're hoping that Callie doesn't join us today.
Yeah, Tony was the best thing I got in the divorce. I was going for the steak knives, and we finally negotiated, and she got the steak knives, and I got Tony.
Yeah.
Where'd Lenny go? We go. Now it's just me.
Some of my book club members say they're going to watch today. I told them I might take a few liberties.
Okay, I'm back. Woo! That scared me.
This kind of thing happens.
Yeah, I have the link up on just in case I need to hurry up and come back in.
Or Facebook cuts us off or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. We're going to, you're welcome to hang around, Gabby, or check in later in the week. We're going to have a session after you, and Eddie Nix is going to show a book with a Braille cover.
Oh, cool.
But the book's not Braille.
Okay.
So I don't know what the story is behind that.
I put shark's teeth on books, so.
Yeah, but Braille is much less dangerous when you want to feel it and fondle it. I imagine fantasy and nonsense is a little more dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got who do we have here? Tommy Sharp. Hello, Tommy. Tommy, I'll text back to you as soon as I can figure out how to do this on my phone because I can't do both in the same place. Rare Book Cafe. Come alive, Rare Book Cafe. We'll see if it happens. Sometimes, Gabby, we have people from all over the world, and sometimes we have people from the left coast or the west coast, and sometimes it's just a mix. Tommy, hasn't seen you for a while. I think he's been here for a couple of weeks. Good morning. Feel free. Where are you from, Tommy? Leave us a note. Oh, we're down to 0.0. I think that means we're live. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Our first guest today, just over there in that other panel. Over there in that other panel is Gabby Cooksey, a book artist from Tacoma, Washington. And up in this panel, up there, there's Lee Lynn, our weekly contributor from Calhoun, Georgia. The Rare Book Cafe is the only weekly live stream program on the internet devoted entirely to rare books and collectible books and the people who love them, and that's YOUU. Good morning, everybody. 12:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Pacific. That's where Gabby and I are out on the left coast, and 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time. We're live. We're streaming at this very moment on both YouTube and Facebook. Isn't technology wonderful? And for the rest of the week, you can find us there, or you can find us on podcasts. You don't have to look at my ugly mug. You can just listen to my ugly voice. You can get us on Google Podcasts or Spotify or wherever good podcasts are given away for free. We're a virtual cafe accessible anywhere and by anyone. Okay. Lee, you're going to be back with us at the end of the show to finish up what you started last week.
Yes. My book club has started meeting again after 15 months, and I'm going to do a little short segment every week on what we've done, what we've read, strange things.
Look forward to hearing more about it. But right now, I'd like to bring on board Gabby Cooksey. If you're able to multiplex out there, everybody, and you could pull up another window with her website, Bound by Cooksey, you are about to be amazed with what she has to share. Good morning and welcome, Gabby.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Oh, good to have you. I mentioned to Alan that we needed to get younger people on the show, and but I was hoping he'd bring in somebody who was old enough to vote. You look too young to be a book artist.
This is going on my 10 years. I just turned 29.
Good for you.
And yeah, I've been doing this for a hot second.
Doing what? What exactly is it that you've been doing?
I have been going to bookbinding school and then apprenticing and then trying to make it as a bookbinder and a book artist.
Tell us more.
Well, I'll start from the beginning. I went to school at American Academy of Bookbinding for a year. I took all of their classes. And then I went to North Bennett Street School in Boston for bookbinding and graduated in 2014. And then I got a apprenticeship studio assistant job here in Washington on Vashon Island with Don Glaister and Suzanne Moore. And I also started working for Jessica Spring at Springtide Press, learning how to letterpress print. And in between all of that and all my small odd jobs, I was working on my own stuff in my studio, making artist books and my own design bindings. And here we are today. I mainly work for myself now.
Excellent, excellent. Excuse me. Did you bring anything to share with us today? Got some visuals? I
do. There is a slideshow.
Okay. Who's running that? Are you running that, or is Alan our executive producer?
Alan is, and I'll tell him when to switch the slides. So.
Are those? They are.
Yeah, I started the slideshow off with my really early work. I made this in 2013 in class in Telluride. And my teacher, Don Glaister, was asking me what I wanted to bind. And I said, well, I think I want to put shark's teeth all around the edges of the book. And he was just like, okay, you do you. And he let me do this. And it was pretty painful to bind, but it was great. It was the text blocks fantasy and nonsense. So just make this wacky binding. And this became my love for incorporating odd objects onto books. Next, please. I think it's just a close-up of, yeah, so you can see the top edge and how the shark's teeth maws in and out. This was my first binding that I sold, so I felt good that I could do this as a career.
Do you take consignments, Gabby? You say the first book that you sold, was that created on consignment or something you just started out with?
Yeah, this book was for a competition, so I was given the text block and put on exhibition, and I kept the book. And then I believe, yeah, Ian Kahn, my book dealer from Lux Mentis Booksellers, sold it for me. So I had the relationship with the book dealer and selling work. So this felt like the beginning was that book.
Cool.
Yeah. This book I made in class at North Bennett Street School. I made it in 2014. It's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And this is all surface gilding with acrylic paint at the bottom to become the rabbit hole. And it's goat skin leather that I hand painted too. I actually kept this book because I really liked it. I usually don't keep my leather bindings, but this one I still have on the shelf back here. You can go to the next one, please. This is just a different way to see the picture. I really like how warm the gold was.
Gold leaf?
Yeah, it's all gold leaf on that one. It's very, the light in it is beautiful, I think. Yeah, and next, please. This book is The Merchant and the Parrot. In 2015, my mentor, Don Glaister, gave me the text block and said to do something with it. So I put some parakeet wings and tail on the cover to make it look like a bird stuck in a cage. And yeah, there's also gold foil on this binding. You can go to the next image, please. And you can see the 3D-ness of it. So whenever you rest the book down, the bird wings aren't getting mangled or anything.
Those are real wings?
Those are real wings.
Oh.
I believe I mounted them with gold wiring that you can't see in the panels. Next, please.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. This might be my favorite design binding I did. This is for an artist book I made called The Book of Penumbra. It's about 7 different death gods and their origin stories. So I created these 7 skulls out of black pearls, and I Dremel drilled the skulls into them and then wired them to the cover. It's just a really neat, it's a small book too. I believe like 6x4 or something.
So you have to be a mechanic as well as an artist.
Yeah, my favorite is figuring out stuff. Also, give me a weird clamshell box and I will love to make it.
I do detect a little bit of the macabre in your style, Gabby.
Oh yeah, I love death. I mean, that sounds weird to say, but I love the
concept
bones.
of death.
Yeah, the bones, the myths behind it. I love teeth. I don't know. I have tons of drawers and boxes full of things that I hope to put on a book one day. And I like the craftsmanship of hiding how I put it on the book. So it's going to stay put forever, but you can't tell how I did it. I really like that aspect of it. We can go next, please. This was an early artist book I did called Somewhere. And this is all images I took here in the Pacific Northwest. It was a very rainy and gray day. And I photo transferred these images onto the paper and then varnished them to make it look eerie and you can't really tell what you're looking at. Can you go next, please, so you can see the inside? And yeah, they're just close-ups of trees and moss and ferns. And this was a beginning concept for a book I'll show later on of this photo transfer process that I keep growing and I'm really intrigued by it. But this was an addition of
a photo transfer process. Tell us just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I take an image and I'll print it just on my regular printer, and you lay matte medium down on Japanese paper, let's say. And so the Japanese paper, there's matte medium on top, and then you lay your printer paper with the image on top. You let it dry completely, and then you rub off the printer paper, and only the ink stays on the Japanese paper. And now you have this wonderful image that's a little hazy, and it feels really nice. I'm really into how the pages or a book feels. So the one that I'll show later on feels like cloth, but it's just all Japanese paper and photo transfer technique.
So you
Very
printed
clever.
on regular paper or on photo paper?
I printed off of just regular
Okay.
20
printer
20
paper.
bond
Pound paper.
Office Depot paper.
Yeah. Just regular. It's easy. That's why I chose it. So I hope to teach this one day because people are really intrigued by it. And yeah.
Let us know when you're going to be teaching it, because that sounds like that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
For amateur photographers who come up with some pictures that they think are kind of interesting.
Yeah,
just to do as a print.
Yeah.
I mean, just to hang up.
Yeah, and it's a easy way that you could just stay in your studio and do. You don't have to figure out how to print it somewhere else, and you're not getting it the exact way you want. You could just test everything at home. And it's just a cheap, easy way to add images to your books that I really like. I believe, yes. Can you go next, please? This is a book called Death of the Poets. It's a text block that Ian gave me to put a design binding on. And one of the images is of a poet in jail. So that's what I mimicked there with spray paint, gold foil, and then the border around it is cabbage paper. I bought it from Hiromi Paper, and I inset it to inside the cover. If you go to the next image, you can see it a little clearer. Yeah, so that's just all cabbage. Which I think.
Who's the poet?
They're all different poets. I believe there's 20 different poets inside the book. I don't remember who compiled them all. Next,
When you say you mean it's literally the paper is literally made out of cabbage, or is it
it's
literally
flattened.
cabbage leaves?
I think it's literal cabbage. They just flatten it and stick it onto Japanese paper. I am not 100% sure, but
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see in the next one I use strawberry paper from the same company. This is Animal Farm. I did this book for a competition at North Bennett Street School, and the inside lino cuts, wood cuts, are of butchered animals, and I chose this butchered pig's head smoking a cigarette as the illustration for my cover. And I used acrylic paint, vellum, leather, and strawberry paper for the nose to make the pig. And the leather is goat skin, but it's this really unique skin that you buy leather in different kinds of grades. First or A grade is the best, and I usually buy thirds because they're the ones that have the scars or weird markings on them, and they're cheaper. But this goat must have had a skin disease, and all of the potch marks were still on it, so I thought this was a perfect binding for Animal Farm. Perfect way to use it.
Or Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, that would have been a good one too. Can you go next, please? I think it's a close-up of the snout. Next, please. This book is an artist book I did called Chronicles of a Coleopterous Strikingly Curious Swarm. It's a mouthful of a title, so I call it the Beetle Book. And it's a bestiary of 11 beetles that I wrote most of the stories, but I also intermingled them with Aesop's Fables or Hans Christian Andersen into the text. But this was an edition of 26, and I tend to go with my age, not as my age for the edition number. So I was 26 when this finished, and the edition keeps getting larger and larger each time I make a new artist book. So I'm rethinking my plan because it's getting too much.
Well, and I'm sure they're getting more popular and more expensive as well with your reputation.
They are, but they're slowly killing me. So I need to make the edition smaller. If you could go to the next
now of that book, did you do the printing yourself as well?
Yes, I letterpress printed it at Springtide Press myself, but I used her equipment. And yeah, I acrylic painted the pages for it too. And on the insides, if we could go to the inside of the book, you can see an aluminum beetle that I also embossed into the book.
Who doesn't love a beetle bestiary?
Oh my God. This one sold out really quickly. This is the title page for it. You can see the acrylic wash that I did on it and the letterpress printing on it. Next, please. Yeah, this is the aluminum beetle. It's a little thicker than kitchen aluminum, so it was really easy to emboss. And then I used alcohol ink as the coloring for it. Yeah, this one was a fun book to make.
Sweet.
Yeah, next please. Maybe.
There we go.
Oh.
Close up.
Yeah, there's a lot of ballpoint pen design in it too. There's a lot of small details in this book. Yeah, next please. I usually do a design binding for each of my artist books, so this is that for the beetle book. I covered it in calf skin. Those are real emerald jewel beetle wings that I set into the cover using a earring line. It's a brass peg basically, and I stuck the wings down into the cover. And there's also a clasp on the foredge to keep it closed. I was thinking like an old bestiary. Next, please.
I guarantee whoever picks that book up is going to ask, how did she do that?
I think Ian still has it. It's still for sale, so you can still pick it up and look at it. It's a fun book to. It was resting on my desk for a while, and I would just come over and look at it and be like, "Ooh, that's
give you the
colors
shivers."
are just beautiful." Yeah. Next, please. This book I did for the open set competition through American Academy of Bookbinding. This was the open portion, so I got to use whatever book I wanted to submit. And this is Shipwreck by Faulkner. And I did a really subtle design of red on red using ship onlay onto the cover. And then I back paired it, basically meaning that I inset that ship in, and then I paired the back of the leather so everything's really flat whenever you cover it. So whenever you run your hand over it, it should all just be flat. Yeah.
Is that the same leather that you used on Animal Farm?
No, it's not, but it's the same color. Yeah. I probably got in the same batch. Next, please. This is my first miniature I've ever done. I like working on large books so I can put as much as I can into the design. So having this very small, tiny book was difficult to bind for me, but it's called The Little Book of Fae. So it's a book about fairies. So I made an abstract wing out of abalone shell, gold wiring, and chicken feet leather, and I inset it into the cover. You go next. I can show you.
Excuse me, Gabby, did you just stutter? Did you say chicken feet leather?
Yeah. You can buy.
What's that all about?
I pulled out some to show you because I know we talked about this. But they come in all sorts of different colors. If you can go to my face, I can show you some chicken feet leather. But yeah, they're just different colors. And you can, I don't know, they're really weird and I love them. I was given this as a gift, a rainbow of chicken feet leather. So, yeah.
So biologically, that was literally chicken feet are covered with leather, and after the chicken is killed or died, they cut off the leg and
they skin it.
Skin it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's actually really thick too. I don't know what that means, but you can see I've used this one. This wasn't for the book I just showed, but I used a part of the center and I used some outsides of it. So you can't really tell what you're looking at. Just like I have stingray leather and you can't really tell it's stingray. But yeah.
Folks, I don't know about you, but I never failed to be fascinated on this show.
We have a lot of chicken processing plants in North Georgia, but I don't think any of them are processing chicken feet leather.
Yeah, maybe I don't think that's a huge market.
Yeah, I don't think so. It could be a profitable one, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I only use chicken feet when I have to do a voodoo spell. I had no idea it could have been used for other purposes. Continue, please, Gabby.
Yeah. I think the next, this image is the clamshell box I made for it. So like I said, I like the problem of a weird book and trying to fit it into a normal box so it can be shelved and not harmed. So that abalone shell sticks out a lot. And I had to create on the left side of the box a shelf unit for it. So the book stays in the box, but the abalone shell doesn't rub on anything. And I really enjoyed making it. Next, please. This is my most recent large artist book I did called Blight. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote the poem in it, and I printed it. I letterpress printed it at Springtide Press. And I'll talk about the insides, but on the outsides here, those are brass corners and paper by Hook Pottery Paper. It's this gorgeous, it feels really nice whenever you sand it, which I did in the center. And it's an edition of 28. Next, please. This is the photo transfer technique. So I grew on my last book called Somewhere to this book, Blight. And this is photo transfer on Japanese paper that I actually painted with acrylic wash first. And then I put the photo transfer on top to create this really muted effect because it was also a very gray day and I want it to be even more gray in the book. And next, please. In the next image, but you can kind of see it here, I used gouache on the outside rim of the border just to accentuate the border. Yeah, right here, I used the gouache against the varnished border. And the text is about climate change. So this border is slowly going down as you read the book, just to show the rising tide or lowering tide. And there's just a lot of meaning into this book whenever you hold it. Next, please. Oh yeah, there's one more. This is a book I did called Pangolin Pandemic. I did it for an exhibition here in Tacoma called Science Stories. And we all got to go to a natural history museum, and we could either work with scientists or a species in their museum. So I chose a pangolin. And I was finding out a ton about them and how much they're poached. And then the pandemic hit, and people thought the pangolins were the cause of it. So this is that book. There's a lot in this book. If you go to the next image, please. You'll see the collaged pangolin. It's a story. The images are a story of a pangolin being alive and then to its death, where it's being descaled for its scales to used for traditional medicine in the East. And the text is about the bubonic plague. And so these juxtapositions of the pangolin and the pandemic. This is a close-up of it. I used wallpaper, paper, fabric to create the scales. And it's an edition of 6. It's a small edition because these pangolin collages take a long time to make. And I still have 4 more to make. This is for my bookbinding people. I really like this image of this binding. Is called a montage sur anglais binding, or a stub binding. So I had these panels and I needed a way to sew them into a book. So I created these tabs, I glued them onto the panel, and then I sewed the tabs together. And the fountain spray of the book is really great, I think. Next, please. This is a close-up of the cover. I made a vellum pangolin tail, and the scales come up a little bit so you can see gold underneath it, and I used alcohol ink to color it in. And that's it. I think that's the whole slideshow.
Fascinating. Gabby, you mentioned earlier that you were, maybe fascinated by death, but you also are obviously very fascinated with life, very fascinated with the environment, and very committed to making a statement in some way about your art. Not so much overtly that it's all in your face, but you made me stop and think about the materials that you use, how it fits into the environment, the preservation of the environment. Where did you come by this philosophy?
Oof.
Well, I'm not trying to turn you into Bertrand Russell or anything, but
okay. Well, I mean,
maybe it's just your generation. Maybe your generation is just so obviously committed to this intentional statement.
We can be hyper aware of everything that's happening, and I've had a lot of death in my life, so I've thought about it a lot, and I'm very fascinated about reading about it. And so it just keeps growing and growing, and I want to make more art about that, because I don't think we talk about it, because obviously we want to live our life, but I'm just fascinated by it, and I want to make other people fascinated by it.
Great. Gabby, can you hang around for another 10 minutes? Because
Sure.
We'd like to have your comment at the end of our next segment. That's Mary Kay that just joined us. Gabby, do you know Carrie Miki-Lani Schroeder from San Antonio, Texas?
I've never met her, but I'm a huge fan of hers. She makes gorgeous
Great. Well,
work.
she was on the show about a month ago, and she talked about a class that she was about to give, and Mary Kay attended that class on the Magic Book Box. And before I turn it over to Mary Kay, I'd just like to remind everybody that you're here and welcome to the Rare Book Cafe. After this segment, we're going to have Eddie Nix join us. Eddie is the proprietor of Driftless Books and Music in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Then we're going to have a couple of our regulars. David Hess will be here with Things Found in Books, and Lynn Thompson, of course, with the story behind the story and a couple of recorded segments. But Mary Kay, tell us about Carrie Schroeder's class.
Sure. Yeah, it was a Zoom class. And I've taken Zoom classes before. This one was small. There were 10 of us in the class. And it was great. And I must say there was a cat. The cat laid on the table some of the times, and I took some screenshots so that I could draw a picture later. I like to sketch things like that, so I'm going to sketch that picture when I have time. But this is what we made. It's called, I'll turn it this way, it's called a magic box. And it opens kind of like the Jacob's Ladder idea. You open it this way, and you can also open it this way. And, you know, when you open it that way, it's pretty sturdy. Open it this way, it's pretty sturdy. And inside, we have, I think this is a, correct me if I'm wrong, a thaumatrope. So we made this. When you open it the other way, we have, and she showed these on the segment when she was on. This is a Vauvel, and you can turn it like this, and it's like a little magic 8-ball. And then over here we have a Flexagon, which I forgot to take mine down that I made before. It's right behind me. I love Flexagons. This is why I took the class. I think Flexagons are like where it's at. It's just so much fun. You know, it's just so much fun. I mean, how cool is that? And this is one that I had made a while back, and I made it this way because it sits on a shelf like this. If I'd made it the other way, it wouldn't have sat. But you do it this way, and you open it. And it's hard to do this on the camera. And I made it with 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. So I had to use bookbinding glue to glue it and weight it down and everything. But that's a Flexagon. But yeah, so Carrie did this through the Austin book. It's called Austin, Texas Book Arts Studio. She wasn't there, but she was someplace else. But you can sign up for the workshop through her website that I think Ellen has the link to. She's doing another one. She's got another one coming up for the Jacob's Ladder book, I believe. But it was really fun. I mean, it was.
I want one of those. What's it called? A Flexagram?
Flexagon, yes.
Flexagon. I want one.
Yeah, it's way cool. Well, you know, there's tutorials online where you can learn how to make them, and there's different ones. They have different names. Flipper Flexagon, I think, is what I call this one that I made. And on hers, it's a card. So, and it was printed like a playing card. So you have the playing card design on the back, and then on the front. And so it was just two pieces.
I want one like that because, you know, I go up to the casino to play poker. And if I got pocket queens or pocket kings, I could just flip them over real easy.
And they probably haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
You could be famous.
Or in jail.
Yeah, well, yeah, both. I have to say, I'm so impressed with Gabby's work. I'm so impressed with all of these bookbinders. I love bookbinding. I first encountered it in a real life situation when I was a kid going to Williamsburg. Colonial Williamsburg has a bookbinding studio, and they don't have a lot of money now, so you never see a bookbinder there. But when I was a kid, you did. And at the book fairs, I looked for those books that were made in Colonial Williamsburg, and you can find them, you know, hand-tooled leather, gorgeous marbled paper, colonial style binding with an old colonial book inside. But yeah, I am so impressed with Carrie and Gabby and these young people. They're doing great things now, and they're not weighted down with kids and families. Just the cat, you know. But yeah,
Gabby, let me ask Gabby. Gabby, you were obviously a little bit of an artist before 10 years ago. Now you're a book artist. But when was the aha moment for you when you said, "Hey, I've got to take my art skills and move them over to bookbinding? Was there one?
I don't know if there was one. There was a moment of Don, my mentor, really believing in me, and that's all I needed because I was so unsure. I dropped out of art school my freshman year. I completed my freshman year, but I dropped out and then went to bookbinding school. And the community of bookbinders, I was like, this feels like home. And then the work I made, people were really into. And I was like, oh, this is really neat. So I just kept pushing and pushing, and people were into it and buying my work. And so this feels good.
So
Excellent.
if people want to buy your work, where do they go?
My book dealers, I have Lux Mentis booksellers in Portland, Maine, Ian Kahn, and Vamp and Tramp booksellers in Birmingham, Alabama sell my work too.
Really? I'm from Birmingham, and
Oh!
I'm planning a trip in a few weeks to see my brother.
Yeah.
So I'll have to check that out.
Oh,
that's
Vicky
exciting.
Is amazing.
That's
Vicky
exciting.
Amazing. Yeah. They're such cheerleaders of my work that it makes it easy because I'm not a good seller. I just want to make my work. And so they can sell it.
Hey, am I back on? I disappeared for a second. Yeah, I just want to say, if you have a chance to take a workshop, a Zoom workshop or a live workshop with any of these bookbinders, these young girls, young men, they have got such great ideas. And I know with Carrie, she was so sharing. If we had questions, we could turn our cameras off, turn our mics off, and just concentrate on her. But if we had a question, we could, type it in or turn our mic back on and ask her, and they share. It's I'm an artist, and I'm an older artist. That community, it's always been tough because a lot of artists think what they're doing no one else can do, but nothing is really new. It's been done before. And when it comes to art, so sharing, when you have a teacher who wants to share, and that's how it was with Carrie. I really enjoyed it. I would take another one of her workshops, and if Gabby was having a workshop, I'd take one of hers if I could get there, or do it on Zoom, because she's just so cheerful. I love that. She's so happy.
Yeah,
well, Gabby, you've obviously made the rest of us happy as well, and I hope you'll come back and do it again someday.
I would love to.
I understand that you're going to be in a competition soon, and maybe after that competition's over, you could come back and show us the work that you put into that juried show.
Oh man, I would love to show. I wish I could show you right now because I am very excited about this book, but I can't show it on social media or else it can't be juried. And this is recorded, so I will show you when it's done. And
well, I just want to say something before I go. I am so proud of you young people in your art. I'm just an old lady artist, and I am just so proud of what you're doing. It's amazing. And the fact that you want to share it with all of us, that's even more amazing. So keep up the good work.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I hope that's enough encouragement for your weekend, Gabby.
I think so.
All right, everybody, please visit her website, Bound by Cooksey.
Yep.
And
.com.
And thank you, Mary Kay. Lee, we'll see you in a couple of minutes. And now, everybody, it's time to move on to the next segment of our show. Eddie Nix, the proprietor of Driftless Books and Music in Viroqua, Wisconsin, is back. Speaking of bindings, Eddie is going to share with us a book that has a Braille cover, but it's not Braille on the inside. Not sure quite how that one works. Eddie, come aboard.
How are ya? Can you hear me?
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Can you hear me now?
Tip top. I hear you.
Excellent. Well, greetings from Wisconsin. Yeah, the book I was going to talk about is this one. It's called The Last Fair Deal Going Down. And if you zoom in real close, you can kind of see that it is Braille on the.
Hold on a quick second there, Alan. You want to bring that on board? Eddie, while we're getting the video to your segment lined up, yeah, hold on there 1 second, Eddie. Maybe your video. Testing 1 2. Eddie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Well, we're waiting for the video to resume. Why don't we just chit chat here for a minute?
Can you hear
business? I can't hear you. How's the spring out there in Broca?
Oh, it's beautiful. We've had an amazing spring coming into summer now, and it's pretty hot. It's been 80, 90 degrees for the last couple days.
Are you starting to see more people through the door?
Yeah, lots and lots of people, mostly coming, like we talked about last time, from the bigger cities around the state, Milwaukee, Madison, Minneapolis up in Minnesota. But a lot of people just happy to be back out amongst the books, let's say, and finally getting to see this weird bookstore of ours.
Yeah, I think people are happy to be out everywhere.
Yeah, true.
So have you had any good acquisitions this week? I suppose people also walk in to say, hey, would you be interested in buying my books? See anything interesting come through the door?
Yeah, there's been some really interesting things. One of the things that excited me the most, and I didn't bring it up here, but it's called of Crawford County. And Crawford County is just the county south of Vernon County where we are. And it's a big, thick, probably that thick 8.5 by 11 photocopied sort of book that was put together by two ladies. And it doesn't say when it was done. It doesn't say when it was assembled. It just says printed at Bob's Copy Shop in 2004 or something. So I'm really excited to do some reading in that and trying to figure out if there's a way we can republish it because it's just such amazing information on a local level that will probably never be put together again. So I'm talking to the Historical Society and trying to figure that out because we did just start a publishing company also.
Video editor. What's that?
What's that?
I said we have you back on video. That book with the brow.
Yeah, so this is the book I was talking about. It's called The Last Fair Deal Going Down, and you see if you get in real close, it has Braille on the cover, and you know the inside is not Braille; it's regular. This is actually the book that was signed to me by the author, who's still living in Iowa, and this is his first book, and it was done. His name is David Rhodes, and he's sort of one of these almost unknown, but now very well known Midwest writers from the 70s who came out of that Iowa Writers Workshop that's so famous down in Iowa. And he put this out in like 72 or 73, published by Atlantic Little Brown. And it is a bizarre book. It rivals William Burroughs, which is another thing we're going to be discussing today, in its weirdness. And I would really recommend people go out and take a look at this author because he's really one of the unknown or hidden gems. He wrote.
That's David Rhodes, Rhoades.
Yeah, Rhodes. He wrote 3 other books in order. It was The Easter House, which is another very interesting sort of Midwest Gothic book. And then a book called Rock Island Line, in which he introduces these characters, this character named July Montgomery. And so what happened was he was a big sensation back in the early 70s and major publishing thing. He got in a a motorcycle accident and paralyzed from the waist down. It was a really tragic story. And he kept writing, but he didn't get published anymore until back in the 90s, or exactly 2008. A young graduate student was doing his PhD on, or maybe it's her, I'm not positive, on obscure Midwestern sort of Gothic writers, and came across David Rhodes and went and found him and did an interview with him and said, you know, at the end, do you have anything you've been working on? Is there any material that you'd like to, show me? And he said, yeah, I got this thing called Driftless, which of course is the name of our store and the name of the bioregion around here in Southwest Wisconsin. So he took the script and brought it to Milkweed Publishers. And in 2008, they published his fourth novel, like some 20, 30 years after his last one, which was a great success. And Milkweed is a nonprofit publisher in Minneapolis. He went on to produce another one called Jewelweed, which was the sequel to this. And I understand he's working on an even another one. So one author that is definitely worth reading. It really describes this area here in the Midwest in a very beautiful way.
So he came in on the tail of the Beat generation, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly, but more from the Midwest point of view. And I suppose you could go into other authors like that, but he's one who's survived the test of time, and just an amazing, sweet man. Yeah, who I hope he gets his due later in life. And these that I showed you are pretty hard to find. There is, but Milkweed, not only did they publish, but they took those last three and republished them in paperback, so you can now get those. And I would definitely suggest looking into the first one called The Last Fair Deal Going Down. Related to that, there's another. Sorry about that. My pile just fell over. There's another book that's similar to that, but instead of Braille, there's holes in the dust jacket. And I know nowadays there's a lot of innovation with dust jackets, but it looks so much like the other one that I thought I'd show it. This is by an author named Eric Davis, who, in my opinion, is one of the premier young philosophers of the United States, writing about myth, magic, mysticism, the occult, just everything weird. His most recent book is called High Weirdness, and it's a study of Philip K. Dick, Robert Anton Wilson, and Terence McKenna. So another beautiful dust jacket, just for the Hall of Dust Jackets. I guess, since we were talking about sculpture earlier, I'll show you this. This is a book gun. It's not an original book gun in terms of...
It's not loaded, is it?
No, it's but you can see they're pretty easy to make. We used to use these in theater. I taught at a Waldorf high school theater, and so we'd have we don't want to have guns in high schools, so we'd make these book guns for the scenes where we had to use them. And you could turn around and read them on stage too, which was interesting. But there's a very famous, famous to me, but very famous artist named Robert The, who makes these book guns professionally. And he's worth looking up if you're into that book sculpture sort of scene.
Very clever.
So I guess the next
have people done books with silhouettes? Have you just seen a gun? I mean, a lamp, a cat. I've never saw the gun before. Are there other silhouettes that people are creating?
Yeah, I've seen a few things. There's a company in town here, and the warehouse across the street actually is full of these. But they take Reader's Digest hardcovers, the sort of nice frilly ones, and they cut out letters of the alphabet. So you'll get a G or a F, and they sell these at wholesale to big stores, craft stores, and things like that. But it's fascinating what a bunch of Amish guys with saws can pull off with a bunch of books. My phone's ringing, so I can't find it though. There it goes. So I guess the other thing I was going to talk about is some of these beat guys. We lost Lawrence and Gabby recently, and sorry about that. And I pulled something
That's
out
a lot
that
of
was
TV.
Interesting to me. It's called Tentative Description of a Dinner Given to Impeach the President Eisenhower. And this is actually the first printing. It looks like a photocopy, but you know how Ferlinghetti did it back in the day. This is from 1959, I think, 58 or 59. And it's a short thing, but what I realized after I found this was that there's actually a record album Ferlinghetti doing the poem and a whole bunch of other ones, which was produced shortly thereafter on Fantasy label, number 7004. But yeah, a beautiful record, which is really getting hard to find, of Ferlinghetti reading some of his poems from that period. And this is, pre-60s, so it's an interesting record for sure. And I guess the other thing I was going to talk about was, let's see. Oh, yeah, Mr. William Burroughs. I brought a few things, some of my favorite little Burroughs pieces, but some of them are obviously from journals. This one being a very interesting early 60s journal from the summer of 1960 called Between Worlds. And it not only features Burroughs, and here's a little review slip signed by the editor there, but it's volume 1, number 1 of this magazine. Marcel Duchamp, Hermann Hesse, some Chinese writers, Henry Miller. So really the great writers of the day in the early beats, Gregory Corso, and Burroughs himself doing what piece is it? 10 Age Future Time, it's called. So that's a early Burroughs piece. Another nice one is this volume 3, number 6 of Talk, which I can't remember which piece that features. And then if you're interested in collecting Burroughs, this is definitely the definitive bibliography that I've come across. Collecting William Burroughs in Print, a checklist by Eric Schoaf, Schoaf. And that was published in 2000. The Burroughs' first book is a very important printing. It's called Junkie. This isn't the first printing of this. It was actually published by Ace Books, and this is the second printing, but the first was an Ace double, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And they published not only sci-fi and westerns, but weird things like William Burroughs. The interesting thing about that double is that instead of it being William Burroughs, the author is listed as William Lee, which was his pseudonym for his first book called Junkie. And of course, he's most well known for his book called Naked Lunch, or A Naked Lunch, depending on which printing you have. This is the first edition. That is the American edition. It was, of course, banned. And I once found this edition, which is the second printing of the first edition. It's the Olympia Press, and it has this beautiful dust jacket on a very small paperback. So the paperback itself is the Traveler's Companion series. That's from Olympia Press. And to find it in this original jacket is pretty beautiful. It was at a library sale in Palo Alto, California. One final note on William Burroughs, one of the more obscure pieces, if you're really a completist and want to impress your wife, is the 2 volumes of flower arranging written by Laura Burroughs, or Laura Lee Burroughs, which is William Burroughs' mother. So she published both of these volumes. When was it? Back in the 50s, I think, early 50s, before he started writing. I think it was sponsored by Coca-Cola or something. But Flower Arranging, a Fascinating Hobby, volume 1, or 2 and 3. I don't have volume 1 right here, but there's actually 3 volumes of it if you're interested in that. And on a final note, just if you're a Bukowski collector of his poetry, always look out for this periodical from the 60s and 70s and 80s, I guess. This one it's called the Wormwood Review. And these are all copies that feature poems by Charles Bukowski. So there's about 8 of them that I have collected. They're mainly from the mid 70s and early 70s and the early 80s. So they feature a lot of the great poets of the time. And, in the age of the internet, these things are becoming more and more scarce. People don't even realize that this was the prime mode of literature before the internet. was little.
You know, Eddie, if it's available for sale, I may be interested in that Ferlinghetti album. You know what? I love the Beats, and one of the things I collect are recordings of the Beats. Here's a set of Kerouac on cassette tape. There's nothing more poetic than the poet reading his own work. So for a book dealer straying over to the audio side and some of these older 45s is not unheard of.
No, it's true. And, you know, since I think I mentioned last time that we bought out a majority of the excess books that were left after the auctions at Serendipity in Berkeley. And Serendipity published some things, including this gem, which is My Days with Richard by Beverly Allen, Richard Brodigan's, one of his wives. And, you know, this was actually published by Serendipity. And, you know, it's pretty hard to find. It's stapled, and it's a beautiful thing for the Fairling or for the Brodigan collector.
Eddie, I may be taking my summer vacation in your store.
Well, you're welcome to come and see it. I appreciate you having me on again.
And I appreciate you sharing some really fabulous material with us. Hope we'll see you again next month, Eddie.
All right, cheers.
All right, keep smiling. All right, folks, now it's time for our weekly segment, Things Found in Old Books by David Hess of the Bookman Bookstore in Orange, California, with his popular feature, one of the most intriguing ephemera shows on the internet. His weekly series, Things Found in Books, has some fascinating items of things that were stuck in between the pages. Today, David shares some vintage needlepoint found in a 1734 Bible. All right, David, share away.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California, with my weekly segment on things found in books. And I have 4 items for you today. And the first item, I don't know if it really qualifies with my things found in books, but I did find it in a box of books. And I found it interesting because it sheds light on something that I wasn't aware of. It's called My Senior Album. And it's from 1955. It's a 1955 senior album. Now I'm used to albums with pictures, and you know, at the end of the year, people would sign their pictures in the album and stuff like that. This doesn't have any of that. It does have some names in there, but what it is mainly built upon, or what the crux of it are these cards. It's filled with calling cards. Little calling cards. Everybody would, I guess, have a calling card made, and as you met your fellow students at the end of the year, you'd give them a card and they would put it in the album, and she literally filled the album with cards, just they're falling out, page after page of cards. They keep falling out. Not all of them were mounted, as you can see. And in the book itself, it has no indication of what school this is from. It has no saying what high school it is or anything. However, someone did write in there, well, after Roosevelt High, we'll get together. So I did a little internet research, and with Roosevelt High and a couple of the names, I was able to discover that this was from the Roosevelt High in Fresno, California, from 1955, a book of calling cards. And again, I had never heard of that. Other people out there might say, oh, yeah, we did that all the time. We always just gave out calling cards at the end of the year. Well, it's a new one on me. So I found that interesting, and I'm happy to share it here with you today. And the next item is called Indian and White in the Northwest. It was written in 1922. It's a Western Americana book, basically about Montana. It's about the Catholic priest who went to Montana and established a church. You can see the little church on the cover there. And but what's interesting inside the book are these many newspaper articles glued into the book itself, just page after page. Now, this gentleman here is the author of the book. It's Reverend Father Palladino. And it says here, Reverend Palladino is summoned by death. So death summoned Reverend Palladino. And there's articles in there about him, about how he was an early pioneer in the Montana settlement, and his work with the Native Americans there. Also in the book are other related articles. Here's one on the Louise Finley, oldest of the Flathead Indian tribe, dies at home in the valley. And on the back, there's like, as I said, there's articles. The articles are actually quite fascinating, and they do shed a lot of light on the time. And back here, right there, is the church. It's called Montana's Oldest Church, Still Standing, and may be visited by pioneers during the convention week. And that is from 1965, actually. And there's an old apple tree that was planted by one of the fathers that's over 100 years old and still producing apples. Now, this church is still there today. Doing a little Google research, I discovered that it's a monument in Stevensville, Montana. And this book is all about details, the whole history of that Montana area, the Native Americans, and the Catholic Church. And then I have this, an old sweetheart of mine by James Whitcomb Riley, an old-fashioned poet that was very popular in his day. And it's actually quite remarkable, not remarkable, it's quite a clean, sweet copy of this book here. I believe this one here is illustrated by Christie. Howard Chandler Christie, which is a very famous illustrator of his days as well. So it's a nice little book. In the book was a Christmas card. Now, the book is from 1902, and the Christmas card, you can tell, is not that old. However, it does look like it's from the 40s. And you can tell it's been in this book. It's got it's made a spot where it's sat in this book for quite a few years. So maybe someone got this book for Christmas as a used book in the 40s or 30s or 20s. I don't know. There's no date on the card, but it's a cute little card. It's adorable. It just says, to say hello and a happy day for Christmas, Laura. And that's basically all you got. There's nothing on the back, nothing on the front. It's just, you look at the card and you tell me how old it is. And finally, a while back, across my desk came a 1934 Bible. Now, I had this Bible, and it's been long sold, so I don't actually have the Bible right now to share with you. But it was not 1934. My apologies. A 1734 Bible. That's a 1734 Bible. So it had some age on it. It was an older Bible. But within this 1734 Bible, and I know nothing about needlework, but was this little patch of needlework. It's not too elaborate. It's not too fancy. What it is, it's got the alphabet, A through Z, and a couple little emblems at the bottom, which maybe somebody was practicing their needlework and this was their first go. And you can tell by the look of the cloth that it's got some age to it. But again, I don't know how old it is. I'm saying I found it in the 1734 Bible. It doesn't mean it's from that old, but it is interesting. And someone, again, who might know needlework, I don't know anything about vintage needlework, you know, if this possibly is from the 1700s. I'd be curious to know. But I've kept it all these years. I've had this for quite a while, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to share. Finally have someone to share it with. It's been sitting in my drawer for a long time. Well, that's all I have for today, and I can't wait to come back next week and do it all over again. If you have anything that you would like to share, please feel free to send it along to oldbook@ebookman.com. Again, that's oldbook@ebookman.com. Send a picture. Send a little description of what you found and where you found it. And I would be more than happy to share it with the audience. It'd be fun. I'd love to share more stuff that other people found. I know those you book dealers out there, you've got to be finding stuff too. I'm not the only one. I'd love to share some of your stuff as well.
That was a sampler. That piece of needlework was a sampler, and it was used by young girls to show their skill with needles. One of these times, we're going to have Mary Kay Watson to fill us in a little bit on samplers. I think she knows a little bit more about that. But I wanted to share something with you real quickly. I found this in a book this week. This is a trifold piece of marketing material from the 1968 presidential campaign of Robert F. Kennedy, which of course ended in tragedy when he was assassinated in Sacramento after having won the California primary. But this is a wonderful piece of ephemera, especially for me, who happens to be a political items collector. All right, everybody, it's time to move on to our next segment, the story behind the story, with our weekly contributor and assistant producer, Lynn Thompson. Here we are in June. June, familiarly to everybody, Gay Pride Month. And we've had a number of LGBTQ authors throughout our history. This week, Lynn is going to share a story of two authors, two writers, who are widely read, but one who would be kind of hard-pressed to find a first edition of their works. Tell us more about that, Lynn.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Lynn Thompson again, coming to you from Chester, South Carolina. I bring greetings from the newest inhabitants of the Walker Mills plantation. We have 10 feet of rescue labs that we've taken in over the last fortnight, Bella and Missy, and they may wander in and out during the course of the proceedings. Missy especially tends to want to be the center of all attention. And so we have to watch out for her a bit more than Bella, who realizes she has a good thing going and naps a lot. But this month, in our stories behind the story, I want to take a few minutes of your time to consider gay and lesbian authors from the past. June is LGBT Pride Month, and all I can say is if you don't like that sort of thing, that's the sort of thing you don't like. But it illustrates in the history of some of the authors I'm going to be talking about how, on top of all the ordinary vicissitudes of trying to write and get published and get noticed and get read and get bought, it's even harder if, as is the case in America these days, You're part of a tribe that sort of flickers in and out of existence every 2 to 4 years with executive orders dependent upon who the president is. So I want to talk about two poets today, both of whom are virtually impossible to find in first editions, and yet who are widely read, widely admired, and whose work exists in many editions. That's a contradiction that I have always found interesting. And the first of the two is one of my personal favorites. And while I think of it, I need to make sure I still have the book handy, because we'll be coming to that in a moment. Constantine Cavafy, who was born in 1863 in Alexandria and died on his birthday in 1933 at the age of 70. He was published only in private editions for friends during his life and is now renowned as the 20th century's greatest poet in the Greek language. Writing in the New Yorker in 2009, another poet, Dan Chiasson, describes the evolution of Cavafy's verse as he passed piled up monuments of history along the streets of his native Alexandria by day. And this kind of highlights what makes Cavafy so interesting as a poet. He is a 20th century man, and yet with one foot in a limitless past, going back millennia, based on the history of the people around him, the monuments they left behind, and the records that we find of them. Chiasson says, sometime before 1450 BC, in the Egyptian city of Heliopolis, the pharaoh Thutmose III ordered a pair of obelisks. They were to be cut from red granite and erected at the Temple of the Rising Sun. 200 or so years later, Ramses II had them inscribed with boasts about his military triumphs. And in 13 BC, Augustus had the obelisks transported to Alexandria and installed at the Caesareum, Cleopatra's tribute to her husband, Mark Antony. There they stood sentry for another 2,000 years as the Caesareum and every subsequent building on that site got pulverized. By the time Napoleon entered Alexandria in 1798, the obelisks, now known as Cleopatra's Needles, had taken on the Osmandius look so fashionable then. One erect, one toppled, surrounded by, quote, lone and level sand on an empty beach. In the 19th century, Egypt gave the Needles away, one to England, where it stands on the Victoria Embankment in London, the other to the United States, where it stands in Central Park, near the Metropolitan Museum of Art. On the spot in Alexandria, where the New York Needle had stood, were the offices of the Third Circle of Irrigation, which managed the water pumped from the Nile to the cotton and cornfield south of the city. This is where Cavafy, a member of Alexandria's large Greek colony and the greatest Greek poet since antiquity, spent 33 years from 1889 to 1922 as a part-time clerk. Cavafy has of St. Mark was supposedly stolen from the city in 828 by a band of Venetians, probably not the weirdest looting incident in Alexandria's history. On Cavafy's walk home from work, he passed St. Saba's, erected on the site of an ancient Byzantine church, and nearby the Greek hospital where Hadrian was said to have built his Egyptian palace. A few steps from Cavafy's apartment was where Alexander the Great's body had once lain on display, encased in a gold sarcophagus. Then, nearing 50, something happened. Cavafy would write a number of erotic poems in historical dress, but until 1910, he hadn't attempted what Ezra Pound called the direct treatment of the thing. The thing, in Cavafy's case, was homosexual desire, a difficult subject to treat at the time. Oscar Wilde had, within living memory, spent 2 years in prison for gross indecency. Cavafy had a model for sexual frankness, in the Greek anthology, that remarkable compilation of ancient insults, boasts, epigrams, and erotica, much of it recovered from mummy wrappings and pottery shards. But many of those authors were anonymous, and all of them had the advantage over Cavafy, and a towering advantage if one wanted to talk openly about relationships between men, of having been dead several thousand years. During the next 2 decades until his death in 1933, Cavafy would compile one of the greatest bodies of poetry in any literature, and what he called the sensual poems are at its heart. These apply to Cavafy's own past, the descriptive rations that had to do for Lysias the grammarian, say, or Herodotus Atticus. The approach feels radical to the modern reader. Cavafy had read and absorbed the English Romantics, and is sometimes described as a latter-day Romantic himself. But his model of recollection differs from Wordsworth's, the way an outline of a drawing on tracing paper differs from a Delacroix. He is truly a unique and wonderful author, and there are many editions of his works, which, in the model of Emily Dickinson, he sewed together in little signatures and gave to his friends. For my money, the best edition is 20 years old now. It's titled Before Time Could Change Them, The Complete Poems of Constantine Cavafy, newly translated by Theoharis C. Theoharis, a Greek Alexandrian scholar at Harvard, published by Harcourt, and it's a really thick book that collected a lot of poems even thought to be lost. And I picked out 2 that I'm particularly fond of. One of a more general nature he calls The Bank of the Future. It's only 6 lines long, and he says, "To keep my difficult life safe, I will draw very few advances from the Bank of the Future. I doubt it has much capital, and I've begun to fear that in the first crisis, it will suddenly stop its payments." And then a few years later, he published one called Hidden Things, which sort of sums up the role of the gay writer in his lifetime and to a significant extent even now. He writes, "From all I did and all I said, let no one try to find out who I was. An obstacle stood there and transfigured the actions and demeanor of my life. An obstacle stood there and stopped me many times when I'd start out to speak. My most unnoticed actions and my most covert written work, from these alone will others know me. It may, though, not be worth their exerting such elaborate attention and taking so much care to find me out. After this, in a more perfect society, another man made as I was will certainly appear and will act freely." And that was a poem by Constantine P. Cavafy, who died in 1933, and who, by the merest of chances, had his work survive his death and those of his friends, and to become recognized and respected to this day as one of the great Greek poets of all time. Another poet of a more modern vintage who almost met the same fate was Frank O'Hara, who was born in 1926 and died in 1966. He studied music at the New England Conservatory, served in the Pacific in World War II, and then attended Harvard, where, of course, in the way things work out, Edward Gorey, the illustrator, was his roommate. He attended the University of Michigan to obtain degrees in English literature, moved to New York, and began teaching art at the New School. Then he got a job in the gift shop of the Museum of Modern Art, and by 1960 he was both an established member of the New School of New York Poets, an assistant curator of paintings and sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art. O'Hara wrote well-received articles on art criticism for Art News, and his immense personal charm and talent made him a well-known figure in the post-war art world. O'Hara was also a poet, although he thought of his poetry as tossed-off occasional pieces, spur-of-the-moment entries in a diary of blank verse. Like William Carlos Williams, he liked commonplace words and irregular lines. Like the French symbolists and real surrealists, he combined reality with the fantastic, the popular, and the campy. Here's one of his poems called Poem, in brackets, Lana Turner has collapsed. The text is, Lana Turner has collapsed. I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head so hard. It was really snowing and raining, and I was in such a hurry to meet you, but the traffic was acting exactly like the sky, and suddenly I see a headline in all caps, Lana Turner has collapsed. There is no snow in Hollywood. There is no rain in California. I have been to lots of parties where I was perfectly disgraceful, but I never actually collapsed. Oh, Lana, we love you. Get up. On a summer visit to New York's Fire Island in July 1966, O'Hara was struck by a beach taxi driver and died of his injuries the next day. He was 40 years old. O'Hara's work was first brought to the attention of the wider public, like that of so many of others of his generation, by Donald Allen's timely and historic anthology of the New York poets. O'Hara didn't cultivate academic alliances or solicit editors or publishers. A friend, painter John Button, remarked, when asked by a publisher for a book, Frank might have had trouble even finding the poems, stuffed into kitchen drawers or packed into boxes that had not been unpacked since his last move. Frank's fame came to him unlooked for. The extent, the sheer volume of his writings came as a surprise to many of even his closest friends. Most wondered where he had found time to do it all. John Ashbery wrote in his introduction to the 586-page collected poems in 1971 that the collected poems of Frank O'Hara should turn out to be such a volume of the present dimension will surprise those who knew him and would have surprised Frank even more. Dashing off the poems at odd moments, in his office at the museum, in the street, at lunchtime, or even in a room full of people. He would put them away in drawers and cartons and half forget them. Once when a publisher asked O'Hara for a manuscript, he spent weeks and months combing the apartment, enthusiastic and bored at the same time, trying to assemble the poems. Finally, he let the project drop, not because he didn't wish his work to appear, but because his thoughts were elsewhere, in the urban world of fantasy where the poems came from. Although he published more than 100 poems in scattered magazines and in a few limited editions, there was no sizable representative collection of poems published in his lifetime. Before the collected poems and later the selected poems in 1974, there were only two slight volumes, Second Avenue in 1960 and Lunch Poems, 1965, readily available. Other books were printed in editions of less than 500 copies, one in only 10 copies, and thus were inaccessible to most serious readers, and, for that matter, to serious collectors of their work. So that's the story of two authors who nearly disappeared into obscurity simply because of who they were and the times they lived in, but whose work was saved from completely disappearing by loyal readers and a few scholars. That's the story behind the story for this week. Next week, two more authors in the gay and lesbian world, each of whom had their own triumphs and oddities to deal with as they struggled to make a name for themselves in a hostile literary climate. I'm Lynn Thompson, and I'll see you then.
Thank you, Lynn. That was fascinating. That was exciting. You know, I started thinking while you were talking about some of the great authors throughout the history. Virginia Woolf, modern authors too, like Susan Sontag or Bret Easton Ellis, the classics like Anais Nin, T.S. Eliot, Marcel Proust. We should probably have a few more segments on that during this month, during Gay Pride Month, because here at the Rare Book Cafe, we respect all people for everything they are, and we respect their art for the quality of their work, not for any of their own and for their self. All right, before we close today, I want to bring back Lynn. Lee, there you are. Last week, Lee, I saw some pictures on Facebook of your newly remodeled home and getting ready to bring the book club back to life. How'd that book club meeting go, Lee?
It went great. The Fourth Sunday Book Club met last Sunday in my newly refurbished deck. And for the first time in 15 months, we enjoyed the company, we enjoyed food, we enjoyed drink. The idea was to share what we'd been reading during the pandemic. Since we weren't real sure, being the ages we are, what it was we were supposed to read or when we were supposed to read it. And we had decided some of the choices we didn't like anyway. So this was not a competition. We were just going to share what we had done. And there was a variety of reading material, bestsellers, mysteries, history, politics, classics. Janice started the discussion. Now, I'm going to, as we go through the weeks with this, introduce you to some of our members. She's a retired nurse, and she always does her research on the books that we're reading and usually brings notes. So she brought out notes. She said she had read Moby Dick from cover to cover and had done it with the help of an English professor, so that she actually discussed themes, writing style, a full study of the book. Very impressive. Then her brother-in-law, Ken, who is a retired pharmacist, pulled out 2 pages of note paper with a list. And he said, well, he had read Moby Dick also, but he just read it for the story. So, but he kept going from there. He had read the book, let me get it right, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders, which talks about distinguishing good writing from not so good writing beyond the phrase, well, I know what I like. Saunders uses 6 Russian short stories by Tolstoy, Turgenev, Chekhov, Gogol to illustrate this. And so Ken read all of those short stories, but he didn't stop there, as his list showed us. He kept going with Anna Karenina, and then went to Steinbeck with Cannery Row and The Winter of Our Discontent. He read The Scarlet Letter, more modern writers, The Girl Who Lived Twice, It Can't Happen Here, The Institute, The Handmaid's Tale, which of course led to the Testaments. He said that it was a good period of reading. His wife said he spent a lot of time with a Kindle in his hand, sitting in a chair, but he had some knee problems during the winter, so I guess that made some sense. But it made a lot of us a little uncomfortable. My list included a lot of Anne Perry mysteries, and I was glad that I had read some of Larry Baker's books after he was our guest on Rare Book Cafe, so I could introduce Larry to the group. It also sent some of our members back to the kitchen for another glass of wine before they made their presentations. So next week, we're going to talk about how my involvement with the book club started with snake handling. So that will come next week. And the book...
Say that one more time. I'm not sure I caught it.
Snake handling. Do you know what snake handling is, Ed?
I do.
Okay. Well, there's a book called, there are a lot of books, but Salvation on Sand Mountain by Dennis Covington was the book that Bob and I first joined the book club to discuss, because Bob's students had gone to snake handling churches for a student magazine at the high school. So that was how we got involved, and it was through snake handling.
Well, we'll have to see if we can combine that segment with Gabby Cooksey on binding a book with snakeskin.
That would be a good idea. That would be a very good idea.
Fascinating. All right. Thank you, Lee. We'll see you next week. Is Mary Kay still with us? not sure what Mary Kay's going on. I know she's going on vacation in August, but she will be back for a few more dates between now and then. So we're looking forward to having her. And I want to see that Flexagon one more time. And of course, every week we'll continue to have our regular contributors like Lynn Thompson, David Hess, Lee will be back. And next week we are going to have our longtime friend and science fiction writer, Rick Wilbur. Been on the Rare Book Cafe before, and we're glad to have him back. It's always wonderful to have authors on this show. You know, we have the book binders, Lee, but what's going on in between that binding?
Oh, and I have something to send to David that I found in a book this week. I'm not going to show it to you because then I want me to send it to David.
You'll ruin the surprise.
Yeah, it showed up in a little 1910 cookbook. So we'll look for that on Things Found in Old Books.
All right. Well, if there's any good recipes in there, make them before you send the book on and share those marijuana brownies with the rest of us. All right, everybody. That's another episode of the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Thanks for joining. Listen to us on podcast if you missed us live. See you next week, everybody. See you next week, Lee.
Bye-bye.
Peace and out.